10 R&B stars. Fans believe used sex to secure fame and fortune. Behind every soulful note and dazzling performance in R&B lies a question that fans have whispered for decades: was success earned only through talent, or did some stars trade intimacy for fame and fortune? From Diana Ross to Whitney Houston, from Prince to Aaliyah, shocking rumors suggest the spotlight was never innocent. These stories blur the line between music and survival, exposing a darker side of an industry built on both brilliance and sacrifice. Stay with us as we uncover 10 R&B legends whose journeys still spark debate. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence. Prince Rogers Nelson, known globally as Prince, was more than just a musician. He was a cultural phenomenon who blurred every line that society tried to impose. With more than 150 million records sold worldwide, 7 Grammy Awards, and induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2004, his legacy as one of the most talented R&B and funk artists is undeniable. But alongside his brilliance, there has always been a layer of rumor that his rise and ability to dominate the industry came not only from music, but from the way he used his enigmatic sexuality as a tool of influence. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, when black male artists were pressured to project a tough, hyper-masculine image, Prince turned that expectation upside down. He wore lace shirts, lipstick eyeliner, and high-heeled boots, redefining gender presentation in popular culture. Fans and insiders often whispered that his willingness to shock wasn't just about art, it was about power. His provocative image, combined with his aura of mystery, reportedly opened doors that pure musical talent might not have unlocked in an industry still dominated by white executives. Do you think Prince's androgyny was a shield against prejudice, or a weapon he used to rewrite the rules of fame? Stories circulated from studios in Minneapolis to penthouses in Los Angeles, painting a picture of a man who was as strategic as he was wild. A former studio technician recalled how after long recording sessions, Prince would transform the lounge into a private sanctuary where moments of intimacy blurred with professional negotiations. Though never proven, these accounts became part of the mythology that Prince was capable of using his allure to secure contracts, collaborations, and loyalty. Such tales spread not because of tabloid sensationalism alone, but because they aligned so seamlessly with the persona he embodied on stage. What set Prince apart was that he didn't appear to be a victim of the system, he seemed to control it. While some artists were said to be manipulated by producers, Prince allegedly turned seduction into his own instrument of power. On stage, he often simulated acts of passion, moaned into microphones, and left audiences in a frenzy. These were not just performances. They were declarations of dominance. His shows were described by critics as collective rituals, where fans didn't just watch, they surrendered. And that surrender echoed into the business side of his career, where executives, promoters, and collaborators reportedly found themselves equally spellbound. Prince's daring extended into his personal and professional relationships. He was known to mentor young female artists like Vanity Sheila E. and Apollonia, relationships that sparked both admiration and gossip. Some believed he gave these women platforms because of intimacy. Others argued it was purely his vision to create a family of protégés. The truth likely lay somewhere in between, but the speculation fed the narrative that Prince used his magnetism as much as his music to build an empire. The most striking aspect of Prince's story is the way he reclaimed control of his body and image in an industry notorious for exploiting black talent. Where others were said to exchange intimacy under pressure, Prince appeared to volunteer it as an act of defiance. By doing so, he blurred the line between rumor and reality, leaving fans wondering if his seduction was calculated strategy or simply authentic expression. His passing in 2016 at the age of 57 from an accidental fentanyl overdose reignited these conversations. Obituaries highlighted his genius, but fans continued to revisit the whispers: had Prince mastered a game that crushed others, or had he paid the same hidden price only dressed in lace and velvet? In the end, Prince remains an enigma. His music is eternal, but his story forces us to confront the uncomfortable belief that in R&B, sexuality and power were sometimes inseparable from fame. Perhaps that is why Prince, more than any other, embodies the haunting duality of brilliance and speculation. Whitney Houston. Whitney Elizabeth Houston, born in Newark, New Jersey in 1963, was destined for greatness. With a lineage of gospel royalty, her mother, Cissy Houston, was a respected choir director, and cousins Dionne and Dee Dee Warwick had already left their mark. Whitney carried a voice that critics described as a once-in-a-lifetime gift. When she signed to Arista Records in 1983 under the watchful eye of its president Clive Davis, she immediately became a cultural phenomenon. Over her lifetime, Whitney sold more than 200 million records worldwide, won 6 Grammy Awards, and set a Guinness World Record with 11 Billboard Hot 100 #1 singles. These achievements should have stood alone as proof of her talent. Yet whispers of a deeper, more personal bond with Davis followed her career from its earliest days. From the very first moment Clive heard Whitney sing, he reportedly said he knew she was destined to be the greatest voice of her generation. Fans later wondered, was this simply the vision of a seasoned executive, or was there more hidden behind the unwavering devotion he showed photographs of the two together? Her radiant smile, his protective hand on her back, became symbolic. Some saw only a mentor guiding his protege. Others believed they saw a quiet intimacy, the suggestion of a relationship that blurred the line between business and personal. Do you think Whitney's rise would have been just as meteoric without Clive Davis by her side? As her career skyrocketed in the mid-1980s, fueled by hits like Saving All My Love for You and How Will I Know, Davis was always present. He selected songs, shaped her image, and defended her against critics who claimed she was too polished for R&B. For many, his dedication was evidence of professional genius. But for some within the Black community, it raised painful questions. Did Whitney need the constant hand of a white industry mogul to stand shoulder to shoulder with Madonna, Janet Jackson, or Celine Dion? Rumors spread of private flights taken alone together, late-night hotel meetings and rehearsals where Clive sat closer than any producer usually would. These moments, never confirmed but endlessly repeated, added fuel to the speculation. Whitney herself remained carefully silent whenever asked directly. She would smile, tilt her head, and redirect the question, a gesture that only intensified curiosity. Her silence created space for fans and media to write their own scripts. To some, it was proof of a carefully protected truth. To others, it was simply the elegance of a woman who refused to let gossip overshadow her artistry. The tragedy is that Whitney's image as the gospel angel was fragile, constantly tested by the weight of such rumors. While she shattered records with the Bodyguard soundtrack in 1992, selling over 45 million copies worldwide, tabloids still circled back to her relationship with Davis. They framed it not as a collaboration, but as a possible secret covenant that gave her dominance in both R&B and pop. For her Black audience, this was bittersweet. Pride in her extraordinary success was tinged with suspicion that her rise came with compromises invisible to the public eye. Insiders often added layers to the story. A musician once recalled that during rehearsals, Clive would lean in and whisper in her ear, leaving the room in tense silence. Was it professional guidance or something more personal? These fragments of memory, whether distorted or truthful, became part of Whitney's mythos. What makes Whitney's story so powerful is the contradiction it embodies. On one side, she remains one of the greatest vocalists of all time, a star who opened doors for generations of Black women in music. On the other, she symbolizes the belief that in the music industry, intimacy could serve as a hidden currency. Whether true or not, these rumors became inseparable from her legacy, especially after her untimely passing in 2012 at the age of 48. Even now, fans debate, was Whitney's light entirely her own, or was it magnified by the closeness of one powerful man? That lingering question, tragic, haunting, and unresolved, ensures that her story will always be told with both admiration and an ache of speculation. Diana Ross. Diana Ernestine Earl Ross, born in Detroit in 1944, rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most celebrated voices in R&B and pop. As the lead singer of the Supremes, she helped the group achieve 12 #1 hits on the Billboard Hot 100 during the 1960s, including classics like Baby Love and Stop in the Name of Love. By the time she launched her solo career in 1970, Ross was already a household name. Over the decades, she went on to sell more than 100 million records worldwide, earn a Golden Globe for acting in Lady Sings the Blues, and in 2012 received the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. Yet despite such dazzling achievements, one rumor has never faded: that Diana's meteoric rise was fueled not only by talent, but also by her intimate connection with Motown founder Berry Gordy. From the earliest days of the Supremes, fans noticed Ross's special treatment. She was given center stage, her vocals prioritized over her bandmates, and eventually her name was placed before the groups Diana Ross and the Supremes. Industry insiders often whispered that Gordy, who managed Motown's empire with an iron fist, was both her mentor and her lover. This suspicion was reinforced in 1971 when Diana gave birth to her first daughter, Rhonda, later revealed to be Gordy's child. For some, this detail was undeniable proof of a relationship that went beyond music. For others, it was simply a story of love entangled with business. What made this narrative more painful was the racial context. In the 1960s and 70s, Motown was more than just a record label. It was a lifeline for black voices in an industry still deeply marked by prejudice. To fans, the thought that Ross may have had to rely on a private relationship to secure her spotlight felt like a betrayal of the promise that talent alone should have been enough. A former Motown staffer once remarked, "Everything has a price," a cryptic statement that continues to circulate in documentaries and fan discussions. Still, Ross was not merely a passive player. Many saw her as fiercely ambitious a woman who knew exactly how to navigate an unforgiving industry. Her transition from Motown into Hollywood with Mahogany 1975 and The Wiz 1978 showed her ability to reinvent herself beyond Gordy's shadow. Yet gossip always lingered. Critics and fans alike debated whether her career choices reflected artistic vision or the continued influence of a powerful man who once stood behind her. By the 1980s, Diana Ross was already cemented as the boss. She signed a then record-breaking $20 million contract with RCA Records in 1981, one of the largest at the time for a female artist. This move suggested independence, yet the Gordy connection was still part of her legacy. For every accolade she received, there were those who whispered that her ascent had been paved by whispered promises and intimate bargains. Even Ross's personal life added layers to the story. She married Robert Ellis Silberstein, who raised Rhonda as his own daughter, further fueling speculation about whether her marriage was also a calculated move to protect her public image. While Ross herself rarely addressed such rumors, her silence created a vacuum that fans and tabloids eagerly filled with theories. In the black community, Diana's story sparked mixed emotions. On one hand, she was a source of immense pride, a black woman who shattered barriers and became an international superstar. On the other, she was seen as a symbol of the painful compromises black women in entertainment were sometimes forced to make. Whether or not the whispers were true, they revealed the larger systemic truth that behind the glamour of Motown lay a brutal industry where power and intimacy often intertwined. To this day, Ross is celebrated as a trailblazer, but her relationship with Berry Gordy remains part of her mythos. Was she simply a star nurtured by a visionary producer, or was her fame partly built on a trade-off that blurred love, ambition, and power? That haunting question lingers every time she steps on stage, bathed in sequins and spotlight with the invisible shadow of Gordy in the background. Janet Jackson. Janet Demita Jo Jackson, born in 1966, was the youngest child of the legendary Jackson family, while her older brother Michael became the king of pop. Janet carved her own path to stardom, building one of the most successful careers in R&B and pop history. With over 100 million records sold worldwide, 10 Billboard Hot 100 #1 hits, and 5 Grammy Awards, She became a global icon in her own right. But her rise was not without controversy. In the late 1980s, as she struggled to step out of her brother's shadow, tabloids began circulating a rumor that would forever alter her image, a secret kiss with Madonna at a New York party. The alleged moment reportedly took place in a corner of a VIP room far from cameras but close enough that whispers spread quickly through the industry. No photograph was ever released yet. The story ignited a firestorm. Madonna, the queen of pop, was famous for using sexuality as a cultural weapon. Janet, on the other hand, had been known as disciplined, private, and ambitious. The idea that the two shared an intimate moment instantly recast Janet as someone who was willing to play the same provocative game. This speculation came at a critical time. Janet had just released Control 1986, her breakout album that sold over 10 million copies worldwide and proved she could dominate without Michael's influence. By 1989, she followed up with Rhythm Nation 1814, which produced 7 top 5 singles on Billboard, a record unmatched by any other album. Yet as her career soared, the rumor about Madonna kept resurfacing. Fans wondered whether Janet had strategically leveraged that taboo moment to gain equal footing with her white counterpart, or whether she was unfairly labeled by a media eager to sexualize black women. Insiders only fueled the fire. A dancer from Madonna's troupe later wrote in a memoir that whenever Janet and Madonna were in the same room, the air felt tense with an energy no one dared to break. That line was enough to give credence to the whispers, even if it offered no concrete evidence. For Janet, the speculation created a dual legacy. She was both admired for breaking boundaries and judged as someone who allegedly used intimacy to climb. The black community experienced this rumor with mixed emotions. On one hand, Janet was celebrated as a daring figure who pushed against conservative norms, embodying empowerment for women of color in entertainment. On the other hand, many worried that white media would reduce her achievements to a caricature that her success would be dismissed as the result of one ambiguous encounter. This anxiety was not unfounded. Tabloids frequently contrasted her with Madonna, framing Janet as the student who learned from the teacher of sexual provocation. Janet herself never confirmed or denied the story. She let her work speak louder than the whispers. Throughout the 1990s, she continued to dominate with Janet. 1993 selling over 20 million copies worldwide, solidifying her as both a sex symbol and a serious artist. Her performances combined choreography, political messages, and sensuality in a way that no one else could replicate. But no matter how groundbreaking her work was, the shadow of that rumored kiss remained part of her legend. What makes Janet's story so compelling is that the rumor encapsulates the very question at the heart of R&B stardom: does success come purely from talent, or is it sometimes tied to intimate power plays in the shadows? For Janet, the alleged kiss became a symbol of that debate. Whether it happened or not, it represented the way society projected its expectations onto her, a black woman navigating fame, sexuality, and comparison to one of the most provocative artists of all time. Janet is recognized as one of the most influential entertainers in history, with a career spanning 5 decades and countless accolades. But among fans, that whispered moment with Madonna still lingers as part of her mystique. It is a reminder that in the dazzling world of R&B, sometimes rumors are as enduring as the music itself. Aaliyah Dana Houghton, born in 1979 in Brooklyn and raised in Detroit, was destined to become a star. By age 10, she had performed on Star Search and shared the stage with Gladys Knight. At 15, her debut album, Age Ain't Nothing But a Number 1994, was released under the guidance of R. Kelly, who served as her mentor and producer. The record sold over 3 million copies in the US and propelled her to stardom. But while the music soared, controversy followed. In the same year, reports surfaced of a secret marriage between Aaliyah and R. Kelly, with a falsified document listing her age as 18 when she was only 15. Though the marriage was annulled months later, the rumor never left her career. It became the most haunting chapter in R&B history. For fans, this revelation transformed Aaliyah from a rising teen idol into a tragic symbol of how intimacy and power could be intertwined in the industry. Many believed Kelly had used his influence to bind her future to his control, creating a dynamic where talent was entangled with exploitation. A former tour staffer later remarked, "She was just a kid, but in the studio he made her feel like a queen." That sentence still divides listeners. Was it genuine mentorship or evidence of manipulation hidden behind glamorous hits? Despite the scandal, Aaliyah pressed forward with remarkable resilience. She broke ties with Kelly and signed with Atlantic Records, releasing One in a Million 1996, produced by Timbaland and Missy Elliott. The album sold over 8 million copies worldwide and established her as an innovator who pushed R&B into a futuristic sound. By 1999, she had also transitioned into acting, starring in Romeo Must Die alongside Jet Li, which grossed $91 million worldwide. Her single Try Again from the soundtrack became the first song in history to top the Billboard Hot 100 purely from airplay. Yet even as she soared, the shadow of that earlier marriage followed her. For the Black community, Aaliyah's story symbolized both pride and pain. Pride because she embodied the brilliance of a young Black woman who became a cultural icon before reaching adulthood. Pain because her legacy was forever entangled with an exploitative narrative she never publicly addressed. She avoided speaking of Kelly in interviews, often dismissing questions with a calm, no comment. This silence, however, only gave the rumors more weight, leaving fans to speculate endlessly. By the early 2000s, Aaliyah was preparing to fully cross into Hollywood, with roles lined up in The Matrix sequels and Queen of the Damned. Her self-titled third album, released in July 2001, debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200 and showcased her maturity as both artist and woman. Tragically, just weeks later, Aaliyah died in a plane crash in the Bahamas on August 25, 2001, at the age of 22 alongside 8 others. Her death shocked the world and froze her story at the intersection of promise and tragedy. Since then, Aaliyah has sold over 32 million records worldwide, and her influence on modern artists from Beyoncé to Rihanna remains undeniable. Yet the conversation around her career almost always circles back to the rumor of her marriage to Kelly. For many fans, it stands as the most painful proof that in R&B, young Black women were not just celebrated for their voices, but also made vulnerable to the darker side of fame. Aaliyah's legacy is thus twofold. She is remembered as the princess of R&B, a visionary who reshaped the genre before her life was cut short, and as a symbol of how exploitation can cast a long shadow over brilliance. Whether fans view her as a victim, a survivor, or simply as a talent gone too soon, her story forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality of what young artists have sometimes had to endure to secure fame and fortune. Luther Vandross. Luther Ronzoni Vandross Jr., born in New York City in 1951, was one of the most beloved balladeers of the late 20th century. Known for his smooth tenor voice and romantic lyrics, he sold over 40 million records worldwide, won 8 Grammy Awards, and was inducted into the R&B Hall of Fame. His hits like Never Too Much Here and Now and Dance with My Father cemented him as the voice of love and longing for a generation. Yet for all his public success, Vandross's personal life remained a mystery, and in that silence grew countless rumors that behind the velvet voice lay private compromises, whispered parties, and discreet relationships that blurred the line between intimacy and influence. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Vandross never publicly confirmed details about his sexuality or personal relationships. He preferred to keep the spotlight on his music, not his private world. But that very silence became fertile ground for speculation. New York's nightlife in the 1980s was buzzing with stories of Luther attending exclusive parties where his gentle charm and warmth made him magnetic to both industry figures and fans alike. A former Manhattan DJ once recalled, "When Luther entered, the whole room softened. He didn't need to be loud, his presence was enough." This memory fueled the belief that Vandross used his subtle charisma as much as his talent to navigate an industry where Black artists often faced barriers. Fans described Luther as a spiritual lover. Women fantasized that he was singing only for them, while male audiences often sensed a hidden subtext in his lyrics and demeanor. The duality of his image, romantic gentleman on stage, enigmatic figure off it, created space for gossip. Whispers suggested that his career longevity was not only the result of extraordinary vocals, but also of quiet, intimate relationships with influential figures in the music world. No photos or confirmed accounts ever surfaced, but the whispers themselves became inseparable from his legend. The Black community viewed these rumors through a complex lens. On one hand, Luther was celebrated as a cultural treasure, someone who gave voice to Black love and vulnerability at a time when masculinity was often equated with toughness. On the other hand, the suggestion that he may have needed to rely on private intimacy to secure his career was seen as both tragic and reflective of an unfair system. In an industry dominated by white executives, Black artists like Luther often had to make choices that the public would never fully understand. Despite the rumors, Vandross's achievements remained undeniable. In the 1980s and 1990s, he racked up platinum albums, sold-out tours, and collaborations with icons like Dionne Warwick, Mariah Carey, and Aretha Franklin. His voice became the soundtrack to countless weddings, anniversaries, and love stories. Yet even as he delivered some of the most romantic ballads of the modern era, speculation about his personal sacrifices lingered in the background. Tragically, Luther Vandross suffered a severe stroke in 2003, leaving him partially paralyzed and ending his ability to perform. He made a brief emotional appearance via video at the 2004 Grammy Awards, where Dance with My Father won Song of the Year. The moment was bittersweet. The world celebrated his artistry, but his frailty reminded fans how fragile life can be. He passed away in 2005 at the age of 54, leaving behind a legacy as one of R&B's greatest voices. What remains most haunting about Luther's story is the contradiction. He was a man who gave everything to music, yet chose silence about himself. That silence protected his dignity, but also invited rumors that continue to shadow his memory. Was his career sustained purely by music? Or did discreet relationships behind closed doors quietly shape his journey? Luther Vandross's legacy endures because of his voice, but the whispers remind us of a painful truth about R&B, that talent and intimacy have often been entangled in ways fans will never fully know. Patti LaBelle. Patricia Louise Holty, known to the world as Patti LaBelle, was born in Philadelphia in 1944. By the mid-1960s, she had already gained attention as the lead singer of Patti LaBelle, and the Bluebells later reinvented as LaBelle, a group that broke barriers with their 1974 hit Lady Marmalade. When Patti embarked on a solo career in 1977, her voice, a powerhouse soprano with gospel roots, quickly established her as one of the greatest vocalists of her generation. Over the decades, she sold more than 50 million records worldwide, won 2 Grammy Awards, and earned the title Godmother of Soul. But alongside her towering reputation, whispers persisted that Patti knew how to use not only her voice, but also her presence, charisma, and allure as tools to secure influence in an industry stacked against Black women. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, LaBelle was celebrated for her flamboyant style, high heels, towering wigs, and sequin-laden gowns. Yet behind the glitter industry, insiders often repeated stories of how Patti could walk into a record label meeting or an elite after-party and shift the energy instantly. Some described her as fearless, willing to laugh loudly, flirt boldly, and take command in spaces where most female artists were expected to be reserved. Those stories fed into a lasting rumor that Patti, while undeniably talented, also leveraged intimacy and personal charm to strengthen her career. A former Motown executive once admitted in an interview, Patti didn't just network, she made people feel wanted. That statement, though intended as praise, fueled speculation among fans that her career was shaped as much by her ability to captivate off stage as by her voice on it. Rumors claimed that Patti's connections at industry parties sometimes resulted in lucrative contracts, sponsorships, or performance slots that might not have been available otherwise. While no hard evidence ever surfaced, the consistency of these anecdotes made them part of her myth. What complicated the story further was Patty's larger-than-life stage persona. Songs like If You Don't Know Me By Now with Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes on My Own, a duet with Michael McDonald that topped the Billboard Hot 100 in 1986, and New Attitude cemented her as both a commercial and cultural powerhouse. Yet critics often noted how closely her on-stage sensuality mirrored the rumors off-stage. For admirers, it was proof of a woman unafraid to live authentically. For skeptics, it was confirmation that she played the game of intimacy and power as skillfully as any mogul. In the Black community, Patty's reputation carried both pride and pain. Pride because she represented strength, resilience, and the breaking of barriers for Black female singers in mainstream pop and R&B. Pain because the idea that she might have had to trade closeness for opportunity reflected the systemic inequalities that Black women faced in the entertainment world. For many, Patty became a symbol not just of triumph, but also of the compromises imposed by an industry rife with sexism and racism. Through it all, Patty herself never directly addressed the whispers. She let her music, philanthropy, and longevity speak louder than rumors. She built a career that stretched into acting A Soldier's Story, American Horror Story, and entrepreneurship. Her famous line of sweet potato pies became a viral sensation in 2015. Even as gossip persisted, her public image remained largely untarnished because of her undeniable work ethic and authenticity. What makes Patty's story compelling is that she seemed to turn the very prejudice meant to contain her into fuel for her legend. Where others saw her flamboyance and audacity as liabilities, she transformed them into assets. Rumors of intimacy as strategy may linger, but they coexist with the reality of an artist whose voice could bring audiences to their knees. Patti LaBelle stands today as both an icon of music and a case study in how charisma and power intersect in the entertainment industry. Her story raises a haunting question: was her legacy built solely on divine talent? Or did whispers of behind-the-scenes bargaining also shape the diva we celebrate? Chaka Khan. Yvette Marie Stevens, better known as Chaka Khan, was born in Chicago in 1953. With a career spanning 5 decades, she has sold over 70 million records worldwide, won 10 Grammy Awards, and earned the enduring title of Queen of Funk. From her breakthrough in 1974 with Tell Me Something Good, a hit, penned by Stevie Wonder that won Rufus and Chaka Khan their first Grammy, she became a force in R&B, funk, and soul. Yet her fiery image, audacious style, and uninhibited energy sparked more than applause. For years, insiders and fans whispered that her ability to command the spotlight came not only from her God-given voice, but also from how she allegedly used seduction and charisma as leverage in an industry notorious for exploiting Black women. In the 1970s, the music business was still deeply male-dominated. Record label executives held immense power, and female artists often faced pressure to conform or comply in order to advance. Chaka, with her big hair, raw stage presence, and no-fear attitude, disrupted that landscape. Industry gossip suggested that her boldness extended beyond the stage, that she knew how to charm and disarm powerful figures in smoky after-parties, ensuring her records were promoted, her tours were funded, and her image stayed at the forefront. Accounts from those years painted vivid scenes. A former studio staffer recalled how whenever Chaka entered a room, the atmosphere shifted. The big shots fell silent and every eye followed her. Such anecdotes, though impossible to prove, added fuel to the idea that her allure was as influential as her voice. She rarely denied the rumors, but she never confirmed them either. Instead, she often responded with a sly smile or a quick laugh, leaving fans to weave their own stories. This ambiguity created a complicated legacy. On one hand, Chaka Khan was a symbol of liberation, particularly for Black women who saw in her an unapologetic force breaking stereotypes of modesty and submission. Her stage persona embodied freedom. She sang, danced, and dressed without fear of judgment. On the other hand, the persistent rumors painted her as a temptress whose career advancements might have come at hidden costs. Critics framed her audacity not as empowerment, but as evidence that she played the game. Her music, however, consistently proved her artistry. With hits like I'm Every Woman 1978, later famously covered by Whitney Houston, and Ain't Nobody 1983, she showcased a vocal range and emotional depth that could hardly be dismissed. Yet even in success, the gossip continued. Fans debated whether she was celebrated because of her undeniable talent or because of whispered bargains struck in the shadows. For the Black community, this duality carried weight. Chaka's unapologetic presence was a source of pride, proof that a Black woman could be loud, sensual, and brilliant without apology. But the rumors also reflected a painful reality that even the most talented women were often judged through the lens of sexuality rather than artistry. The fact that stories of supposed seduction became entwined with her legacy highlights how difficult it was for Black women to escape prejudice. Despite the chatter Chaka Khan has endured as one of music's most influential artists, she battled personal struggles including addiction and still emerged victorious, earning induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2023. Her longevity and continued respect suggest that while rumors may have followed her, they could not define her. In the end, Chaka Khan remains both celebrated and judged worshipped for her talent, yet shadowed by speculation. Her story embodies the tension at the heart of R&B fame, whether brilliance alone was enough or whether artists had to wield intimacy as a hidden currency. With Chaka, the truth remains elusive, but her impact on music is undeniable. Teddy Pendergrass. Theodore Derice Pendergrass, born in 1950 in Philadelphia, began his career as the drummer of Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes before stepping out as lead vocalist in the early 1970s. His commanding baritone turned songs like If You Don't Know Me By Now and Wake Up Everybody into classics. By the late 70s, Pendergrass launched a solo career that redefined R&B masculinity. Between 1977 and 1981, he released 5 consecutive platinum albums, an unprecedented achievement for a Black male R&B singer. His shows, especially his famous women-only concerts, became cultural phenomena. Women screamed, fainted, and showered him with lingerie as he performed. But along with this fame came whispers that Teddy did not just sing about love, he used his sensual image as a tool to win influence and favor behind closed doors. Industry insiders often recounted that contract negotiations sometimes didn't happen in corporate offices, but in luxurious hotel suites where dim lighting, expensive wine, and private conversations blurred business with intimacy. Rumors spread that Teddy leveraged his irresistible appeal not just to enthrall audiences, but also to charm executives, investors, and influential women who could back his career financially. A former studio assistant once admitted Teddy didn't just sing about love, he knew how to make love work for him. For fans, this duality created both admiration and unease. He embodied freedom, a Black man commanding attention in a world that often sought to minimize Black male sensuality. Yet some whispered that his image as the ultimate lover came with an invisible price, that his career was partly built on ambiguous exchanges few dared to discuss. Tragedy struck in 1982 when a car accident left Pendergrass paralyzed from the chest down. Though many assumed his career was over, he returned to music and even performed at Live Aid in 1985 to a standing ovation. His resilience proved his artistry went beyond image. Still, the whispers lingered. Fans debated whether his earlier success was built only on voice and charisma, or also on private bargains in smoke-filled rooms. Teddy passed away in 2010 at age 59, remembered as both a soul icon and a man whose story remains shadowed by speculation. Rick James. James Ambrose Johnson Jr., better known as Rick James, was born in Buffalo, New York in 1948. By the late 1970s, he had exploded onto the music scene with his unique blend of funk rock and R&B. His 1981 anthem, Super Freak, became a global hit, and later earned new life when sampled in MC Hammer's You Can't Touch This. Over his career, James sold more than 10 million records, won a Grammy, and became infamous for his outrageous persona, tight leather outfits, long flowing hair, and unrestrained sexuality. But beneath the flamboyance, fans and insiders insisted there was calculation that Rick James deliberately used sex and wild energy as weapons to seize control in an industry stacked against black artists. Stories abounded of Rick transforming business meetings into wild parties. A former manager recalled, whenever Rick wanted something, a tour, a contract, he'd pour the drinks, turn up the music, and suddenly the meeting became a seduction. Fans whispered that his outrageous antics were not just rebellion, but strategy disarming executives with pleasure so they would sign whatever he demanded. On stage, James embodied excess. Women tossed undergarments at him, and he would sometimes stop mid-performance to flirt with the crowd. Off-stage, the stories grew darker. Recording sessions turned into impromptu parties, deals allegedly finalized in the haze of alcohol and intimacy. An unpublished memoir from a record label employee claimed that Rick secured one of his biggest contracts directly after such a gathering. While never proven, these accounts cemented his legend as a man who used chaos as currency. For black audiences, Rick James was a paradox. He was celebrated as fearless, unapologetic, and capable of forcing the white-controlled industry to notice him. Yet he was also mourned as someone who may have tied his success too closely to scandal and indulgence. His legal troubles, including convictions for assault and drug-related offenses in the 1990s, only reinforced his reputation as a man who lived and exploited the edge. Rick James died in 2004 at age 56 from heart failure with drugs found in his system. His legacy remains double-edged. He is remembered as a funk innovator who influenced generations, and also as proof of how fame, sex, and power can collide in destructive ways. Under the glittering lights of R&B, talent was undeniable, but whispers of intimacy and hidden bargains never truly faded. Diana Ross, Whitney Houston, Prince Chaka Khan, Janet Jackson, Rick James, Teddy Pendergrass, Patti LaBelle, Luther Vandross, and Aaliyah all left behind legacies filled with both brilliance and speculation. Were their careers built solely on divine voices and artistry, or were the shadows of private compromises part of the price for glory? The truth remains complex, leaving fans divided between admiration and suspicion. What do you think? Was it always about the music, or sometimes about survival? This is Legends of Black Excellence.